Hey everybody, I'm Chelsea Tornetto with At Home Author, and today we are going to talk about board books with one of our At Home Author clients, Claire Short, who did a wonderful job of self-publishing her first board book. She is a speech and language pathologist and designed a book specifically for her clients, and it's so cute. And so I'm really excited to have Claire today. Hi.
Hi, Chelsea. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad to talk. So, what we want to do today is just talk about Claire's experience with publishing a board book because we have a lot of people who wonder, is it possible to self-publish a board book? We know that it is a little more expensive sometimes on the printing end. You can't do print on demand, and so it's a little bit more complex in terms of distribution. So, we just thought we'd talk to Claire and let you all see a real life example of someone who did it and had some success. So, Claire, tell us about your book.
Yes. Okay. Well, it is called Bo the Boat. I also have it in Spanish, Bo el Bote, right here. And it's a little lift the flat board book. As you'll see on the first page, it gives an explanation of some of the early speech and language goals that we are supporting in this book. Here's the little character Bo, and we have Captain Mo, and it's a little story about their day at sea. Um,
You even did lift
and
the flap. I love it.
Yes. And so I wrote it specifically with toddlers, even babies in mind and their early speech and language goals, and came up with the story. Bo and Mo, B and M are some of the earliest sounds that we develop as babies and toddlers. And so that was the inspiration behind the character names. And it's been a really fun journey to get to this point.
Awesome. Okay. And we got to watch that journey from beginning to end. And it was so fun to watch you write and publish your first book. So, why, you kind of mentioned this already, but why was it important for you for this to be a board book? Because it's a super cute story. It could have just been paper pages, I'm sure, and done fine, but you had some specific reasons that you really felt it needed to be a board book. So tell us about that.
Yes, and when I started with that home author, I really was looking at every single possibility, including doing more of a paperback or a hardback. And the more I talked with parents of young children, and then my experience with my own young children, I just knew that because my target demographic was 0 to 3, it really needed to be a board book, especially if it was going to be lift the flap. Those flaps already get torn off when you have an enthusiastic toddler.
Yep.
So I knew it needed to be a board book if it was going to be successful at that market.
Okay. Yeah, we've all been there. I've had my little kids tear up so many books.
Hmm.
So board books are way more sturdy. Okay. So, one of the biggest reasons that a lot of our clients decide not to do a board book or they feel discouraged from trying it is the cost of printing. So what did you find in real life experience in terms of like the difference? Because I know you did a lot of pricing, I'm sure. So what did you find in terms of the cost to print and how did that affect your decision?
So, yes, I was very aware going into this decision that it would be potentially an expensive endeavor. And so I did a lot of research. And I, even before I committed to creating this book, started to talk to printers just hypothetically, if I were to write not only just a board book, but a lift the flat board book, what would the cost be? And I spoke to my book designer, Arlene Soto, who I met through At Home Author. And she also was under the impression that they were very expensive to produce. But when I really went and did the numbers, and now also given that it's only 20 spreads instead of maybe your
Yep.
typical like 32 or more, it was not that much more expensive than doing a hardback if you're doing offset printing abroad, which is what I had decided to do. If I had wanted to print domestically, which would have been my preference if I had the option, it would have been so expensive to produce each book that I would have lost money
Okay.
each purchase. But for example, most with my first print run, I ordered 1,250 copies, and I was able to get it at about $3 per book, including shipping. But then with the most recent, I was able to order more. I ordered 2,000 copies, and I found a printer that was higher quality and less expensive. And I, with shipping, have brought the price down to $1.56 per book.
Wow. Yeah, I was going to ask about shipping because so tell us about the printer that you chose. You don't have to
Yeah,
name them if you don't want to, but like,
sure. So I did again a lot of research and looked at several different offset printers, primarily in China. The reality is that that is right now for most people, I'm finding the most affordable place to print books. And I spoke to several different companies. Like I said, the first one, it was more expensive, but also the communication in the end did not go very smoothly. And I actually ended up regretting not receiving more personal recommendations from authors who had used a printing company before deciding with them. But my second company is out of China, and I've had an incredible experience with them. In fact, they respond to me at all hours of the day, and sometimes I think that they either are up all night or are using AI in some way to effectively respond to my requests. And so I've had nothing but good things to say about them and have recommended them to several other authors. So if you want to reach out to me via email or Instagram, I always prefer to refer authors to them individually, but I would be happy to share that information.
Awesome. Yeah. And if you haven't yet, make sure that you all go and follow Claire on Instagram in particular is my favorite. She does a fabulous job. You started from zero, right? Like you just created an account when you decided to do this book. And how many followers do you have now?
Think like 2,600 maybe. It goes up and down.
Yeah. Well, it's great for a first-time author and you have such cute content. So if you
Thank
haven't, go check out
you.
Claire's Instagram. So you mentioned the communication thing. I think that's a big Um, at least for me, I've never self-published. I'm traditionally published. And when I
Mhm.
think about self-publishing and getting it printed in China or somewhere else, that's
Mhm.
intimidating to me just because of language barriers and not meeting them in person, or like you said, not having a personal recommendation from someone. How did you feel about that, or how did you go about connecting with them?
Yes, I was also apprehensive about that. And in an unexpected way, I've learned some neat things about Chinese culture through this process. So, for example, there is a holiday that takes place in January, February, where the factories are offline for 2 weeks at least. So that's the problem I ran into with my first print run is that they were behind. And then all of a sudden I got to this deadline where they said, well, now we're going to be postponed another 3 weeks because we haven't printed by this point. Um, I was very fortunate that I have a good friend from college who lives in Beijing now and was able to help me in that situation. But like I said, I would not recommend this path. What I would recommend is talking to authors and finding someone who they highly recommend so that if you do get in a tough spot, you maybe can at least chat with them, figure out how they got over this hurdle. But with my current printer, I mean, it's never longer than a day before I receive a response to an email, and if I have any concerns, they immediately address them. So I feel really as at ease as if I were working with a domestic company after finding this one.
So the language is not an issue. They type to you in English mostly.
Exactly. I think
Yeah.
that's where we're seeing the benefits of technology these days is that I don't know whether or not the person I'm communicating with is fully bilingual, but whatever technology they're using to help translate, it's been seamless.
Works fine. That's awesome. So, in terms of these overseas orders, you hear a lot of concern about tariffs. Have you
Mhm.
had any issues with tariffs?
So I was definitely concerned about this, and a couple of the social media author groups that I'm a part of, everyone was very concerned. And so far, it has not impacted the cost at all. And every time before, like I said, this is my third print run. I double, triple check that there will not be an associated tariff, but so far there hasn't been. I think it's always good to do your due diligence, though, with your printer and a little bit of research to make sure that that's the case. But my understanding is that specifically children's books have not been affected in the way that maybe some other products and maybe even books marketed towards adults have been affected.
Awesome. I've heard that too, so that's reassuring. You mentioned that you got your book down. The first print run was around $3 a book. And you held up your book, but what is it? Like six by what's the
It is.
measurements of it?
It's 6 by 6.
Okay.
My second book, which I can talk about if you'd like, is going to be probably either 7 by 7 or 8 by 8. I'm still deciding, but I am finding that actually the size of the book is not making as much of a difference in the cost as I expected. I think it's more the number of spreads that is changing the cost.
Okay. And so like $3, and then you said your new printer, you ordered more, so it's even
Mhm.
cheaper,
Mhm.
which is really important in any offset printing
Mhm.
situation.
Mhm.
Always know that the more you can order up front, the more you're going to save per book. What is your retail price and what's your margin?
Yeah, if this would be the most important point, I think, of our whole interview is that in addition to deciding based on the cost of the book, I really had to do my research on what I could sell it for. And I think that if I were just selling a typical board book where there was no sort of like catch or expertise involved, it would be very hard to sell it for what I'm selling it for. But because I have this speech language angle, and it's really more, in addition to just being a sweet bedtime book, it has this educational piece. I was able to sell it for 16.99, and it's been interesting. I've sort of toyed around with offering discounts on Amazon, and I'm finding that because I have peers who are also selling speech language supporting board books for a similar price, that I'm not having issues with competition there. But like I said, I think if I had been selling it just as a typical board book about a boat, it would be a lot harder to sell it for more than even $10 per book.
Yeah,
So I
so
have
you
to
feel
potentially.
like I'm thinking if I go to Barnes and Noble or I mean wherever I'm shopping, a board book of that size is usually in the like, I don't know, 8 to
Mhm,
$12 range. So you're
mhm.
just saying that you think your expertise and the specific purpose of the book adds the value.
Absolutely. I also think that hypothetically, if I were to do more events, which I've done a few, I think seeing it in person, that will always help you justify the price. But if you're competing on Amazon, it's so price driven that there really
Mhm.
has to be something that grabs the customer in the description in the first couple of lines to justify why they would looking at this price, why they would look at this price.
Did you do any price adjustments like was it 16.99 from the beginning or did you like start somewhere and then realize, "Oh, I need to change?"
So that was a little bit nerve-wracking, but my book designer, Arlene, highly recommended putting the price on the book. So I knew that I wouldn't ever go above this price, but it actually is, if you look in very, very small print on the
Yeah.
barcode, it says 16.99. But like I said, I've on Amazon or on my website, I will occasionally adjust the price to see if it performs any better. But I'm finding that it hasn't, if I drop the price, for example, a dollar or two, I'm not really finding there's a difference.
The next thing that everybody always is worried about with board books is because you have to offset print, you have to somehow, if you want to sell on Amazon, you have to get those books to Amazon or stock them on Amazon. You can't just set up a KDP account and do print on demand. So
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about the process of how a offset printer author can get their book on Amazon and whether that was difficult or what you thought about that process.
Yes, so this is also a big deciding factor, and I am using something called Amazon Advantage where they request a certain number of books each week, and I send them in bulk to Amazon, and then they do all of the distribution, including the packaging, and the absorbing the cost of sending. Um, but as a result of that, I pay them a whole 55% per book. So that's again where that markup cost is so important, or what the listing price is so important because I only get 45%, and then that doesn't include all of my other costs. So it really, the margins get very low very quickly. You can also do fulfill by Amazon or fulfill by seller merchant. Um, and I have a friend who has done that, and she's also crunched the numbers and has found that fulfill by Amazon is very similar to Amazon Advantage. Now, I'm sure it's different for every author, but
Mhm.
that's what her experience has been. And Amazon Advantage, they Amazon is very hard to understand and to get a real person on the phone to answer
Yeah.
questions. And they sometimes just close applications for Amazon Advantage and then they open them back up and then they close. And I think right now they may have just reopened, but I was fortunate that when I was looking how I wanted to sell on Amazon, it happened to be open for application. It did take a little while to figure out the best way to apply so that they would accept me because it can be a little bit technical what they're looking for. But I have found it's the best solution for me because I didn't want every single time I received an order to then have to go to the post office and package and sell it myself. I liked the idea of sending in bulk and then them sending it out for me. And then I hear some authors complain about the cost of even just sending the books to Amazon. And I don't know if it's because mine's smaller, but I only end up having to pay about 20 cents per book to send it to them in bulk. So that part hasn't been as much of an issue.
Yeah, that doesn't sound bad.
Yeah.
So basically you send the books to Amazon, they have
Mhm.
them in their warehouses, they keep 55%. Your 45% that you keep has to cover your printing costs, your illustrator, I mean like the
Mhm.
production of the book, and
Mhm.
then anything left over is your profit.
Mhm.
Okay. So have you broke even yet on your investment? Because, we always tell people self-publishing is a business. You're going to make
Mhm.
upfront investments and it's going to take some time to recoup those costs. Where are you at in that
Yes.
process?
So I was just looking at this more carefully recently because it's a little complicated because if you look at my business expenses, I now have also invested in a second and a third print run and have started on the second book. So it does not look like I've been able to break even because of all of these other investments. But in terms of the first print run, I was able to break even and make some off of the first print run. So I was super excited about that.
That's awesome. And you funded your project from the beginning with a Kickstarter.
Mhm.
So tell us about that.
Yes. So I was a little overwhelmed with all of the initial costs and decided that this would be a good way to not only help with the illustrator costs, and I invested in a really high quality, at least in my opinion, high quality illustrator, which
Yeah,
I think made a
definitely.
huge difference in the marketability of the book and the cover, the draw of the cover. So Paula Rodriguez, amazing. But because of that, I had a lot of initial expenses, and so I developed a Kickstarter. I highly, highly recommend looking at some free Facebook groups to get support for those Kickstarters. Like, I believe it's called Kickstarter for Authors, where you have this whole community of authors who are happy to take a look at your page and give you feedback and give you all of the suggestions for really drawing backers in. And it's basically just a fundraiser site where, so I asked for $4,000 initially. And anyone who wanted to back my project, they're not just donating money, they will get something in return. So for my backers, it was one of the first copies of the book, potentially a signed book, a Spanish copy. I also offered a couple of extras, like a classroom package where I come in and speak to a preschool or to parents. And then I was able to meet that 4,000 in 6 hours, which was incredible. And that was
That's
because a
amazing.
lot of work ahead of time
Yeah.
advertising that it was coming up. And then so when I posted that it was live, immediately quite a few people from social media, friends, family, and then some new backers who just found it on Kickstarter were able to support. And it is a lot of work, as anyone will tell you. I am really glad I did it because I think it also drew a lot of interest to the project in a way that I couldn't have advertised just using my social media or email campaign. But then not only is it a lot of work during the campaign to continue to draw interest, and I wanted to try to surpass my goal, but it also is when my books arrived, then fulfilling all of those orders and
Yeah.
fulfilling the extra promises was definitely some additional work than if I had just sent them all to Amazon.
So did you ran the Kickstarter and
Mhm.
that's kind of a, like you said, fundraising, but it's almost more of a pre-order
Mhm.
platform because they're not
Exactly.
really just giving you money. Like you said, they're ordering a book.
Yeah.
And so did you do that simultaneously with Amazon or did you wait until your Kickstarter was finished before you listed it on Amazon?
Yes, so I did the Kickstarter in September, and then because of these delays with production, I was hoping to do my Amazon launch in later in that year, maybe at the latest early 2005, and then I wasn't able to release it until March 2025 on Amazon. But I think that was a blessing in disguise because as it turns out, releasing around the holidays is not
Yeah.
a great time. Yep. And then also I think that I'm noticing that my sales are better in spring and summer just organically because it's more of a springy, summery book. And so I think launching in March was actually the perfect time. If I had done it any earlier, I'm not sure that it would have gone as well on Amazon.
Yeah, a lot of authors are surprised to find that the holidays are not a good time. I mean, we all think of
Right.
that as the shopping time of year and you want it to
Mhm.
release. And if it's out, before the holidays, September,
Yes,
October, that can work. But releasing during pretty much Thanksgiving afterwards into Christmas, it just kind of gets lost in the shuffle of all of every company in the world is running the most ads on Amazon they've ever run. And so it's really hard to stand out whenever.
exactly. I wonder if you were maybe they would do better on your own website or at events, but just specifically with Amazon, there's just so much noise that time of year that
Yep.
you're trying to weed through. And then, but because I did have an established presence, I noticed that my Amazon sales went up that time of year. But
Yeah.
if I
Are
hadn't, that
you
would have been tough.
so are you running Amazon ads? That's the next question everybody always wants to know.
I am. I'm sure there are many ways to do it without running Amazon ads. What I found out is I had this initial burst of sales on Amazon, and then for a while it stayed pretty steady. And I think some of that was just word of mouth. And then I sort of had this crash a few months afterwards where I was just not selling very much at all. So I did quite a bit of research on Amazon ads and I started those and then immediately saw an improvement. But it did take quite a bit of research to not just be sending
Yeah.
money to Amazon that was not effective.
Yeah, Amazon ads are a little bit scary because you do have to spend money to see the return. And if you don't know where to spend that money or how to spend it, it can be a black hole pretty quickly. How many books have you sold so far?
I
Total.
just checked before I hopped on with you, and I just hit 1,600 this week. So I'm really happy
Awesome.
about that. That includes Bo the Boat and Bo El Bote, but Bo El Bote has not been a big seller on Amazon and online. Interestingly, I had a huge conference in November with other speech therapists, and in person, the Spanish book sold very well. A lot of bilingual speech therapists who are excited about using it with their kiddos. But yeah, so I'm happy. My initial goal was just to sell the 1,250 that I had purchased with my first print run, like over years. So when I surpassed that, I was thrilled.
Yeah, that's awesome. We see, I think there's some statistic out there that says that the average self-published children's book author only sells like 200 copies in the life of the book or something. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's just, and that's mostly because they don't know how to market it or they
Right.
don't, know what to do. So, but so 1,600 is fabulous and that's great. I'm so glad you had that success.
Thank you.
Um, Okay, so the last question that I want to talk about is, would you do it again as a board book? Do you regret the decision of making it a board book, or do you think it was a good decision? And what would you say to people who, we're hoping this video will reach people who are thinking, I really want to do a board book, but I've heard this and this and this. So what do you say to those people?
Yeah, I think overall I have very few regrets in this process, in large part because of using at-home author. I think you all had done so much of the research up front that helped me avoid a bunch of the pitfalls that I could have potentially fallen into.
Yeah.
And I think if I had just been stubborn and saying I'm doing a board book and not been able to do and not done the research to confirm that I would be able to sell it for a certain amount and that I would be able to do the offset print for a certain amount, then I think I would just be in a deep hole and be very depressed about it. But because I did the research and the due diligence, I am really thrilled with the decision to do a board book. I know some authors who have decided to start with a hardback first, and because you can do print on demand and then make a board book version of it, that would be more possible if it wasn't a lift the flap. But because mine was lift the flap, it really was the only option. And actually, my book designer helped me make it into a paper book version that instead of lift the flap, it's just basically what's under the flap is a second page. And I do sell those on KDP, not nearly as often as the board book version, but it's been neat
Mhm.
to sort of see what the process is like. I have a second book coming out that I've decided to also do as a board book, lift the flap, and keep in sort of a similar theme of supporting speech and language. But if everything goes okay with that one and I were to write another book, I think I would like to try the process of just doing a book that potentially has the option to be a board book, but that I could also sell print on demand just to see what that's like. But overall, I'm pleased with the decision.
You, Claire, so much for
Yes.
joining us.
Oh, nice
I
to meet
love
you.
chatting with you, and we appreciate you shouting out At Home Author. Those of you who are
Mhm.
watching, if you are interested in learning how to self-publish or traditionally publish a children's book, whether it's a board book or not, At Home Author offers a course called Profitable Picture Books, and it is a monthly membership. It's very affordable. And it's basically an online course with a little bit of support offline as well. So anyway, we'd love to have you.